how would we celebrate Ontario 150? What would be an ethical, thoughtful, useful dialogue to start? And of course, this is a complex question for Indigenous people because it's not necessarily something that we feel like celebrating. It hasn't panned out for us in the same way as it has for many other populations in Canada. We came to the decision that it would be a collaborative project between the Royal Ontario Museum and Indigenous Visual Culture students at OCAD, and that it would somehow involve the collection of Indigenous artifacts. We wanted a way for students to engage with their history. What has come forward in so many of our investigations here at the school is that this history hasn't been told. It hasn't been told in the curriculum in regular school, but it hasn't been told to our people either. The examination of that history seems to be where we can get a good, solid start on understanding what does it mean to engage in reconciliation. What does it mean then to engage in relations with the rest of the province if we don't have a hold of our own historical truth?
Initially, it was exciting to be able to come and see those collections and see those objects. So that was my initial excitement, was being able to access. Because I'm not really sure how that would have worked if I just went on my own and be like, hey, can I come in? Like, I really don't know how I would be received.
It's really overwhelming when you're in the ROM. There's so much to see in the archives. To be given the opportunity to go into the ROM and to explore and to sort of contemplate an object and bring it into the future and give it a voice, I think is a very great opportunity to be given.
We look at these museums often as a place where things are frozen in time, and that doesn't really serve us well in most cases. We should give credit to both institutions, OCAD and the ROM, for engaging in this kind of dialogue and this kind of conversation, because it shakes up the established norms, which may or sometimes may not be the best way to frame some of these artifacts.
The really fruitful part of this project is building relationships between institutions, exposing the museum to Indigenous community, to Indigenous youth who will speak their mind.
When I started this project, and I was telling my mom about it because we talk all the time, her reaction was that I needed to look into things from our territory, and I needed to look at these beaded Cree hoods from around James Bay. And I get now how desperate she was to learn about these things, especially as a person who was never taught about her own culture in a way that honored her, and I know she feels a deep loss there.
We kind of started to think about the idea of having something online that would be interactive and accessible to communities across the province. And Indigenous students at OCAD have the capacity to translate their ideas around these issues, and of course these are issues they're dealing with in their coursework. They have the means to translate that into a digital format. They literally uncovered these things that have been held in drawers. In some cases, these objects hadn't been handled by an Indigenous person for decades, potentially, many decades.
It was sort of overwhelming. Some things you're not able to touch, some things you are, some things are in bags, some things are covered.
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, a little claustrophobic, and it's a little heartbreaking to see those objects.
It was very quiet, and I felt like it maybe shouldn't have been so quiet.
There's always that ongoing tension of custodianship and how these objects should be looked at and preserved. It was kind of like looking at pieces of oneself in an environment where one person is not particularly, I suppose, explicitly welcome. While this project was facilitated, it was under very exceptional circumstances.
One of the most exciting things about this project is raising issues around how did these artifacts become acquired? What is the proper role, given the cultural context of the artifacts? Just the nature of the museum and the institutions that collect these kinds of artifacts.
Our first encounter with the objects last September was quite emotional. There were some tears. And then we saw the students move through that phase into a kind of joy and humor as they were looking at their objects and developing relationships with them. And we started to see the object kind of spark up, you know.
I picked this quilled, beaded panel, just this little square panel of the Thunderbird, and that's what the panel I picked had, that motif, a very simplified geometric form with a technique I haven't seen before of wrapped quilt work from porcupine quills. Usually it's like flattened and then folded and created into geometric patterns. Those objects were created by Indigenous people who have been displaced, and their only way of supporting themselves in the new colonized world that they were living in was to make these wares, make these objects to sell. And I kind of liked that they were using such strong symbolism of these like very powerful Manitou beings, kind of simplified and kind of just interwoven, like still as an act of resistance.
When I was at the ROM, I always felt like I was picking up on different frequencies and energies, and so I decided to use that as sort of like the jumping point of my piece, almost as if I was following little like threads or like audio snippets. It is a leather-bound stick that has deer claws on it, and it makes a really nice, almost like sound of waterfall when you use it.
In the Ojibwe culture, we were very river-based, and we did a lot of fishing as a result. So when I thought about the idea of casting a net and being able to return what you need, while at the same time letting the things that you don't need slip through, there was this idea of sifting and processing and information. The inspiration for that came when I actually saw a netting needle engage used by the Ojibwe people at the Royal Ontario Museum. It's something that I identified with very deeply. In a way, it was practical and material, but at the same time, there was a strong cultural aspect.
If you guys remember, I'm working with a birch bark scroll. So the scroll is what's called a prescription scroll. So it's written similar to what we understand as a prescription, where the person would collect these items and put them together to create some sort of remedy.
This is the one that they have at the ROM in the vaults. Interestingly, these pipes were broken on purpose. There's a very specific little break, like right there, that cannot be made if it's broken by accident. Often these pipes were used by men when they went into political discussions. The smoke would rise up to the creator, and there would be a communication between the smoker, the pipe, and the creator.
We asked the students to consider the past, the historical documentation, or what role did these objects have in the past. And then we wanted the student to think about if this object was still in current use in contemporary life, what would it look like? What would it be doing? What would its function be? What would that object do if it could somehow be brought back and would lead into a future? What does an Indigenous future look like? And how would those objects be implicated in that future?
My piece is titled Frequencies. It's just exploring objects that have either been lied dormant for a really long time or have been silenced, just kept away from public use. My piece is morphed into now a series of soundscape audio tracks that also have a visual component to them. It'll give like little elements of what the object was and is, and then just bring it into sort of future contemplations. How would the energy carry on?
How they're envisioned in terms of futurity is fantastic to me. In every case, it's completely unlike anything I would ever think of doing. So it's very exciting to see that growth and cultural evolution going on.
We're just allowing them to exist again. We're just allowing them to be alive again. I'm hoping to communicate the power of these objects. People just think they're just sitting there. Maybe if they see this object reimagined today and for the future, maybe they'll look at other objects, learn about them, and then try and visualize what they would look like today and tomorrow.
So there have been a number of projects that are really quite winsome and funny and inventive. We will have things to show, but I think it is the establishment of a relationship between the student and that object that actually is the most important thing that will come out of this. Because I feel like it really is about giving back that object some of its agency and some of its voice.
Our students are not in the Digital Futures program. They're in the liberal arts program. And they've been tutored for a long time by Bonnie, by Ryan, by our Indigenous faculty. And so I think what they bring to these digital projects is not a naivety, but just a freshness. It doesn't feel like the same sort of tech trend project that I see cranked out of Wired.
So my main idea essentially is a tutorial on how to make and remake waistcoats. My hope with this is that by reintroducing this back into communities and changing essentially powwow dress, or like how it is we're making our regalias, and furthering, basically connecting that bridge from then to now, might be spurring people to think, well wait, if so-and-so had a waistcoat in their community, what do we have in ours?
So basically it's going to be, I don't know if anyone's seen online, there's videos where it looks like a regular video and then you can just scroll through them and it's a 360-degree view. So this is kind of what I want it to look like. It's a similar graphic style to the scrolls, and then in the background I'll have imagery of bark that I've collected.
We spent time on the road. We did things together. There was a lot of really open and frank discussions. There was a lot of soul searching even within the class. And that's something you don't see in a classroom every day. And I think it was very particular to this project. And I think it enriched their perspectives and it created a very fertile ground for creativity.
I think this is really a groundbreaking opportunity for us here at this school, because there are many different departments that never work together. So the Indigenous Visual Culture Program, which we're a part of, we fall under the liberal arts, it's a humanities sort of area of the school. We never work with the digital faculty. And so the idea of taking these Indigenous art projects, bringing in a digital faculty expert to bring them to life, to put them online, to give them some kind of web interactivity, this is new.
Right now, as it stands, if you had asked me, so I started this BFA process about 2.5 years ago, and if you had asked me then, would I be sitting here, would I be a part of this project? No, not at all. All of a sudden, I ended up in classes about Indigenous media, Indigenous literature, and it just sort of like activated something within me that I feel is very important for myself to carry forward. And so I think that is kind of the pleasant surprise in itself, is that it just led me to a kind of stepping point.
Just to see these reimagined, requickened, as I've heard it said, and brought back to life, and then taken into a future that nobody knows what that looks like, but that's what's exciting about it, and for me, that's why this project really never needs to end. I think it should be, a regular ongoing course here that builds over the years, and these archives just, get larger all the time.
These are now my mid-process renderings of beaded elements from the hood, which I've begun to remix into like a virtual space. I'm interested in creating an animated piece exploring the history of the hoods and their role in our world today, and using this 3D rendered beadwork I've created in Maya to illustrate that. Maya is like a computer animation and 3D modeling software, which enabled me to create a digital bead I was then able to multiply, give luminescence to, and bead within a digital plane. What was really surprising about this, for me, was about how much this process was actually very much like beading. I'm a beader.
These are my 3D renderings. I'm relating this to Twitter, and this is how we kind of engage with the bird effigy today. It allows us to kind of come together and interact politically with each other, even though we may be spread across vast distances. So it brings you into this part of the project where you can see the leggings. You're encouraged to click through, and the diamond motif will take you into the artwork as sort of an enveloping air, I guess, that would shift and change the clothing, move the person between different figures, as well as have the clothing glitch. So they might be wearing the leggings, and then they might have, our INVC sweater on, and to just show how there's sort of this motion through the present, past, and future.
And we've been getting emails from faculty members saying, I feel like this compares to the presentation I just had at an Ivy League university in the States last month. This is literally what people have been saying. I feel invigorated, I feel excited for the future. And I hope that means staff and faculty from different parts of the school have a renewed interest in, working with the Indigenous program, and also hopefully just the excitement of young people's ideas at this school that sometimes don't have the chance to really blossom and flourish because they don't have that expertise that you can find if you work between the faculties.
I mean, institutional change is always glacial in its speed. So, we've opened up this door and we've allowed these exchanges to happen. I think it's still going to take a lot of work and a lot of negotiating to finally figure out a system that works for everyone. There's a lot of baggage to navigate in that regard, and we're much better positioned than we traditionally have been to be able to look into the sources of knowledge and traditional learning and teachings and about the history that we had before Canada became a nation. As time goes on, the youth who come in and start researching for these projects will have a much better understanding than even we did when their time comes. So I really think that it's important to look at our projects in terms of the context of where we exist, not only as like a part of Canadian society, but where we exist in time as well.
These objects are a kind of anchor to a core set of values and a core set of beliefs, and I think we need access to them. I don't believe that we can go forward and build a really strong, vibrant, and healthy future unless we know where we come from, and we know what those old people were intending when they made these objects. The ingenuity with which they made them, the care, the love, the generosity that they lavished on these forms.
I definitely want to continue going in to bring those who understand what these objects are and have a real love for these objects come in and see them.
There has been a sense of empowering, I think, and also of liberation, that suddenly they feel that they can play with these objects in a good way, not in a destructive way, but to imagine new futures for them and to imagine them going out into the world and doing their work and liberating others to interpret them in their own ways as well. Surely this is the role of those objects, and if the students can be involved in bringing that about, how wonderful.